Good afternoon. It's Monday, the 13th of June, 2016, just after 1 o'clock. Welcome to UK Column News. I'm your host, Brian Girish. With me in studio, Patrick Henningsen. Well, Patrick, it would appear we've used up the summer sunshine in UK.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, back to the normal reset.
We're back to the normal global reset as far as the weather's concerned. So it's pretty grey, humid here in Plymouth, and that's the reports across most of the country, or at least the areas that have come in so far. And it seems a few people are looking forward to a few spots of rain. Arizona, presumably still about 106 or something.
100, probably 100, more like 110.
Yeah. Should we export some of our rain to Arizona? Would that be?
They could use it, absolutely. Okay. There's definitely water issues.
We'll set that up as a business, containerized clouds, British weather, shipped to Arizona.
It's geoengineering, just take it from one place and give it to the other.
Could catch on.
And they could send some sunshine over here.
Absolutely. So I put the thumb on top for that. Absolutely.
Has to happen.
Well, we're going to start off with Her Majesty the Queen, because I have to say how extraordinary that the British public is still coming out to celebrate this lady's birthday. What do we want to comment? Remember that this is the Queen who has given away her power to the European Union under mediatisation. This is a subject which is never covered in the press and the media. And as alongside her utter betrayal of the British people, she was also introducing the expression common purpose into her speech. So thank you very much to several people who emailed me to say how remarkable that the Queen should now be saying that, well, of course, the nation had a common purpose. And they're saying, was this an accident with the speechwriters? Well, we don't think so. So utter betrayal. Sure, the American audience won't know about mediatisation, but the Queen thinks it's quite acceptable. She keeps all of the money, all of the image, the gold, the drippings, the jewellery, but she simply hands her power away to a foreign power, the European Union, also known as treason, I believe.
Well, so it's a constitutional crisis as well.
It is. And presumably, at the moment, we've got something similar unfolding in the States as we see yet another incident, which I think is going to be linked to gun control. But take us through what's been happening in the States.
Well, this is the world record, or at least the U.S. record for a mass shooting. This is the biggest mass shooting to date now. We're told, anyway, although the reports have changed, and we'll go into some of the anomalies of this. So I'm going to just walk you through. This is a major incident, and this is playing out in the media in a very, very big way in terms of the politicization of this event already within hours before the blood was even dry on the pavement, so to speak. The politicians began weighing in and consolidating and trying to extract political capital from this tragedy. And you know, what type of a tragedy it is, we're not sure, but we have found some very bizarre anomalies with regards to the shooter and the connections that he has, and how this was handled by police. And a lot of these questions aren't being asked in the media, so we might show you. We'll ask them today.
Yeah, excellent. So where do we go? This is jihadists here releasing.
Or back to the shooter, actually.
Sorry, back to the
Daily Mail
shooter.
article. So this is the shooter, Omar Mateen, and it just so happens, and I've seen this pattern with previous mass shootings, Brian, at least San Bernardino, and possibly in a few others last year. The shooter was on a terror watch list. So this is what they call a known wolf, as opposed to a lone wolf. And so he was being investigated in 2013 and 2014, allegedly for links to somebody who was the so-called American suicide bomber in Syria. His name was Moner Abu Salah, and he had made announcements on social media, death to homosexuals, back in 2011. Right. And shortly after, it appears in Syria, in the Idlib province, and supposedly detonates a suicide bomb. And this was covered. So again, this is an interesting, known to authorities. While he was working for G4S since 2007, for 9 years, working for a security company, training to be apparently a police officer recently, a qualified police officer. So he's under surveillance. He has a file. He's been psychologically profiled, all of the above, by the FBI and also maybe by his employer as well. Very strange, but yet we saw this exact same scenario, similar scenario with previous mass shooters.
Right.
Interesting.
And the whole background of gays joining the terrorist organisations, of course, that was pushed very strongly, about a year ago, across British newspapers in particular. And we were told, quite remarkable, that all of these gays were volunteering to go and fight for an organisation that was then going to murder them by pushing them off the tops of buildings. So there was something strange in the background. The other thing I picked up from this Mail article is, of course, he bought his gun legally.
He did.
Which I think is significant.
Very significant. The fact that this was bought, this is confirmed by the ATF, Federal Department of Alcohol, Tobacco, and Firearms, that he bought his gun legally. So that means this incident can then be put under the umbrella of gun control.
Gun control, yeah.
If it was illegal and if it was a stolen weapon, then the gun control issue is neither here nor there. So very convenient. Was purchased only a week ago.
Right.
Interesting.
And if we just reinforce that point, probably for American viewers, of course, here in UK, very, very few people own a gun. If you do, you're a licensed owner of the gun, but still the state wants to take more and more of those licensed guns away. Meanwhile, where do the criminals get their weapons? They buy them on the black market, and they simply don't bother with the legal system. So that twist is quite significant on legal acquisition of the firearm.
So let's just take a look at the next slide. So this is the person they were investigating him with having links to back in 2014 and 13. This is Monir Abu Salah, the American suicide bomber. And this, of course, is presented by S.I.T.E Intelligence. And they're based out of Bethesda, Maryland, very closely linked to the intelligence services and to Israeli intelligence, U.S. intelligence as well. They get the exclusives on all these so-called terrorist scoops and all the videos, and even the ISIS videos that we see in the news or portions of them, they're premiered
through this organization.
On S.I.T.E Intelligence. So here's another actor type character who appeared, who no one can actually confirm he blew himself up. This is the thing. I don't know if there's been any real forensic investigation that this was indeed the suicide bomber in Syria. I certainly will question the authenticity of that and get a photo of him.
Let's just bring that on here.
In the next slide, you can see there he is. He is from Florida as well, lived nearby the apparent shooter today. So you can see there's been a setup here of a storyline, a plot line that began back in 2011 and moves forward to this point at the present time, using these quite dubious characters, some of which we can't even confirm whether they are who they say they are, and they were where the media or S.I.T.E claims that where they were. So we're supposed to take ISIS's word for it, once again.
Whoever ISIS is.
Whoever ISIS is. So this is kind of interesting.
Right. And we have this gentleman here. This is Wackenhut.
Sure. Well, this is the shooter. This is Omar Mateen. And so he worked for G4S, and that was formerly a merger with Wackenhut. Just a little background. This was organization originally was founded partially by George Wackenhut as a CIA front company. So what do these companies get up to? Well, they do contract work for the government, for corporations, and for intelligence agencies, and quite nefarious in some cases. So merged with G4S in, I believe, 2010, a big merger, big payout for the proprietors of Wackenhut. So this is who this person's been working for, this type of firm, specifically G4S, since 2007, I believe, according to reports. So we'll just advance to the rest of the story here. So this is interesting. We're going to show some background on that as well, but very dirty business. A lot of scandals, bribery, corruption. I'll show you the privatized prison scandals, child abuse, all of the above.
And one of the incredible things is we're often saying to our viewers that we don't sort of sit down and plan our daily news. Information comes in and then the story seems to develop. But you've come in obviously on this very important event in the States. What's been coming in to me this morning is stuff to do with GCHQ and information. Where does it go? It goes straight into this mix, very toxic mix of high-level state surveillance agencies and very dirty corporate interests. So I think it's going to be interesting to see how that unfolds as we go through the news. So you've got some video clips, I think, for us
Sure.
here.
We'll just set it up with this slide. So this has become routine now. This is kind of, I hate to say it, Brian, this is kind of a media ritual now. After a mass shooting in America, they have press conferences running all day and for the next, say, 72 hours, where they line up all the members of law enforcement within the camera frame. So it's not one person talking to camera, it's the show of force, the strength in numbers.
Yeah.
It's also kind of celebritizing these law enforcement and first responders, elevating them to very high level in terms of the public perception. And this is done through media, and you can see here's a shot here, a wide shot of the press conference. This is, mind you, this is hours and after the actual event. So they all assemble, all clean shaven, all looking really smart, all lined up. In another shot, which we don't have, it'll have men, women, different races represented, black, white, Chinese, Hispanic, male, female, to show this kind of diversity. This is pretty standard.
Diversity within a hive, isn't it? Because it's
within law enforcement and city officials and so forth, and then they boast about how fast the response was. In this case, the response was horribly slow, 3.5 hours in a sort of hostage situation. So we're meant to believe that this happened at 2 a.m., and then finally the police here broke in using a Bearcat, which is a kind of armored vehicle, an urban tank, busted through, after 3 hours, decided they're going to bust through the wall of the nightclub, okay, and using explosives. Now, this, I've never heard of this happening in the United States ever, okay? This is for Baghdad, or if you're doing a prison break in Baghdad.
Yeah, because normally they're trying to do something where people are not given any reaction time to let off a grenade or whatever it is.
Sure, and so we're meant to believe that one shooter, one single shooter, managed to seal off multiple exits and entries by himself for 3 hours with 300 people. Well, at the beginning, 300 people inside this nightclub and one shooter. Maybe 100 or 150 escaped initially. The shooter comes outside the nightclub, engages with an on-duty police officer armed at the nightclub, doing overtime. They exchange fire outside. The police officer allows somehow the shooter to go back into the nightclub for 3 hours.
I've got to smile because as it unfolds, it just becomes unbelievable.
It's completely unbelievable, as is when the ballistic reports come back, 200 shots fired, 50% hit rate, 100 shots landed. And out of the 100 shots, 50 dead. I mean, even for a military point of view, it's beyond probability.
In a confused situation with people running and hiding and...
with the lights out and so forth. So absolutely unbelievable. So I'm waiting for the ballistic reports. Where are they? I can't make any conclusions. I can't speculate or jump to any conclusions until this investigation gets underway. Yet the media and the politicians, as we show, have already accelerated the rhetoric and the hyperbole after this issue. Everyone's trying to capitalize on it. The media's trying to get ratings. The police are grandstanding. The FBI, the alphabet soup agencies are all present, all there, present and correct. And all the Donald Trump, Hillary Clinton, Obama have already
stepped up to speak out.
Stepped up, and with their agenda that's attached to this event, which we'll show you in a minute. But we'll go ahead, and I think we're going to play this. This is the initial video clip. Listen to this.
Only through today, but through the next weeks. As the sheriff said, I really want to reiterate the point. Our See Something, Say Something campaign is valid, it works, but we want to encourage people to use that. As you come up with and you're aware of information that is concerning to you, it's concerning to us. If you're aware of information relative to people, either conversations, social media, or actions of people in our community that you believe could threaten the rest of us, please let law enforcement know. Use those tools to let law enforcement be aware of that information so that we can act on it.
Okay, so that's the constant barrage of this message throughout the day yesterday. And this is another law enforcement leader there. If you see something, Brian,
Say something.
Say something. And if any suspicious behavior, either in your community or on social media, see something, say something.
Which has been hammered home in UK on numerous times, that we can only be safe if we are effectively spying on our neighbours.
Correct.
They don't tell you what you might see. If you're frightened of anything, report it.
Anything strange or things that you
See
don't
it,
like.
say something.
So the FBI will now come on and take this to another level. Listen to this.
The FBI and the partnerships we share here, we take that see something, say something one step further. If you see something and you say something, we will do something. So if you have some information, no matter how small you may think it may be, that would relate back to today's events, please share it with us. And I would urge you to call the 1-800-CALL-FBI public access line. We have phones standing by to take any type of lead or information whatsoever. We're conducting countless interviews, and you will be seeing a huge presence from the FBI in the coming days to resolve this matter.
So a huge presence to resolve this matter. What huge presence to resolve what?
To resolve what? It's already been resolved. They've already come out with their conclusions. They say it's ISIS-inspired. They're claiming that the shooter pledged allegiance moments before the attack to Abu Bakr al-Baghdadi, the leader of ISIS,
right,
who no one has seen in 6 years or something, or 3 years or something like that. There's
right.
no actual, so again, this is exact MO of previous mass shootings, events, Garland, Texas, and San Bernardino, pledging allegiance to al-Baghdadi. Strange, but yet this is what we're meant to believe.
Right. Well, I know you've got some set questions which you wanted to work through here and effectively discuss.
Sure.
So let's see if we can bring the first one on here.
So
here it is. Yep. Why did the nightclub armed security stand down like Bataclan Theatre in Paris?
So not only was there a police officer on duty, there was other security on duty at this nightclub. 320 people, according to the license that you would need to run that venue, is going to require something like between 5 to 7 security doors, access and egress. Okay, so where are they? And also in America, some of those would be armed.
And presumably they're going to be licensed people. Certainly in UK, if you're a bona fide bouncer, as we might call them, they've got to be licensed.
And who would they be working for, Brian?
Well, aside from the company that they're employed to, they're going to be closely working for the police, or they're going to be a private security firm. Yeah.
G4S, the same firm as the shooter, which is interesting. And this is something.
It's just a coincidence,
It's
Patrick.
a coincidence, and the media haven't asked that question yet, if there's any connection there. I'll also say that the police officer on duty somehow absconded from the scene or exchanged fire, did not pursue the gunman into the nightclub. Extraordinary.
Yeah.
And then 3 hours later, they have to smash the wall down and then send a SWAT team in with explosives, a tank, and then firing as they enter the chaotic nightclub scene.
Straight out of American movie, maybe.
So my next question will be...
this one. How could the police on duty engage in gunfire outside and then allow the shooter to take shelter inside the nightclub? Okay,
which
well,
we
we probably just covered that one. How could a single gunman block multiple exits? Well, you made that point earlier, but of course it absolutely stands. How is that possible?
Yeah, it is impossible. And in fact, well, as I'll show later, there's some people have reported, whether it's valid or not, of multiple shooters, which we'll show you in a minute.
Yep, and you've set, well, I mean, by setting these out as bullet points, they really stand out in front of people here, but we've got the sheer scale of the operation, the explosives, this Bearcat vehicle, and then a SWAT team. I use the expression, it's like an American movie, because it's just too theatrical, as opposed to a calculated, how are we going to get this dangerous man? It's all what looks good on the TV. So vehicles moving, men moving.
So is this how police are meant to react to perceived hostage situations?
No.
As normal?
Well,
from here forward? From
everything I know, as just an ordinary member of the public, you do it in a very measured way. There's an attempt to negotiate. People are going to do things in a very calm, measured way.
This is straight out of Terry Gilliam's Brazil again. It's surreal.
Okay, so what about this one? How many of the said victims were killed by police action in this case?
This is a good question. How many victims were killed in the crossfire or when explosives were detonated and a tank came through the back wall and SWAT team came rushing in? How many people were killed by the police? That's immediately what I would be, because a single gunman couldn't have that sort of a kill rate or a hit rate with having to reload 6 times minimum on a 30 magazine clip. Minimum 6 times, because if 30 mag has 30 bullets in it, over 200 shots, that's over 6 6 or 7 reloads, Brian.
And again, the police bursting in, confusion, you would expect a lot of wounded. You wouldn't expect all deaths, would you?
Sure.
So the police said initially we rescued 30 and 42 were sent to hospitals.
This was the hours after the event. The police came on national TV and said this. And then now, if you hit the next one, this is what came a few hours after that. That 20 dead became, they said 20 dead initially, then it became 50 2 hours later.
So they would have to be saying that of the 42 that were sent to hospitals, those were all dying people.
I guess so. But it seems to me the numbers seem to change quite frequently these days on mass shootings, whereas in previous coverage in, say, the 80s, if you look at the early 90s, you analyze some of these events, how the media coverage, it was very precise.
Yeah.
When the police would release casualty figures or death tolls, it was absolutely precise. Every single detail was precise.
Because the public got very upset if inaccurate casualty figures are given.
Yeah, and that's all gone out the window now. Yeah. In today's coverage.
And then the last one you've got is, how can any media political conclusions be drawn in advance of an investigation? Well, I think you're spot on with that one.
Yeah, and this is what we've seen. So, and then just a quick background here. Look at G4S in your next slide and Wackenhut. Just some of the things that these companies are involved in, racked by sexual abuse scandals. This is pretty standard. These in privatized prisons. And you can see a whole litany of stories and scandals surrounding this company or this group of companies. We'll go on to the next one. This is a hazing and lots of stuff going on in Afghanistan. These are government contractors.
Right. If I just read a bit of the text underneath this picture, it says drunken brawls, prostitutes, hazing and humiliation, taking vodka shots out of butt cracks. No, the perpetrator of these animal house-like antics aren't some depraved frat brothers. I think that says there, from private security contractors guarding the US Embassy in Kabul. So you could say this is depraved. You could use a word like this, but it's very sinister when you've got very powerful corporate, global corporate companies, immense power, huge amounts of money, and you've got people who are behaving.
It shows there's a strange culture in some of these businesses. They're a culture of impunity, a culture of abuse, no morality, probably bullying and coercion as well. So go to the next one. This is interesting. They're also involved in attacking unions. So this is the private security company really just trying to stand in the way of union organization for this industry. And actually, this could be an important industry to have unionized if you think about it in terms of security and regulation. You would want this to be a regulated industry, security.
Sorry, if we could just bring that one back on screen there. So this is what is Promoting Ethics in Public Life, National Legal and Policy Centre. And so it's talking about a racketeering suit against the union.
Yeah, so they're attacking the union, accusing them of racketeering.
Right.
So just to show you that this is a full spectrum corporate movement, the private security movement. It's hitting all sides of business and society, and is really very deep into our lives in ways that most people aren't even aware of. They see them every day. We're surrounded by private security.
Private security, in our courts, in particular in UK. And we've even got The Guardian here actually reporting on CIA-hired private contractors for secret assassination project.
Yeah.
So what does it say? It says CIA hired contractors from the controversial private security firm, well, they're talking Blackwater here, to take part in secret operation to track down and assassinate members of Al-Qaeda. It was reported today. So that was going back to 2009. But of course, your point is made there that private firms being used to carry out murder, assassination on behalf of governments. Sure. That's a pretty mucky trail.
This is what we're dealing with this company, this company employed this shooter in Orlando this weekend. So this just to give us a little framing of who we might be dealing with here, what types of organizations we're looking at here, and what kind of craziness might be going on behind the scenes. He would have had to have been psychologically profiled. He would have had to go through various evaluations, years of training, firearms training, other training as well that maybe we're not fully aware of. He's been through all of this with this company, and these are the companies involved in all the things that we just demonstrated before. So who is this man?
Yeah.
Who is this shooter? This is a question that will not be asked by the U.S. media, absolutely off limits.
So we'll continue to ask it. And then we bring in the politicians, and who better than the lovely Hillary Clinton?
Sure. So it's case closed. She's already, within hours, Hillary Clinton made a speech announcement and decided that this was a terrorist attack, and this was somehow ISIS linked, or linked to what the U.S. is doing overseas in places like Syria.
Maybe she would know because she helped start that trouble.
Correct, and also that this is an attack on the international LGBT community, and we must all stand together, individual of the victims and so forth. And it just happens to be a coincidence that this attack happened on the eve of an International Gay Pride Day. So there are vigils all over the world yesterday in different cities. So the timing of that, make of it what you will, Brian. Is it just a coincidence? Could be. But I think it's interesting that these politicians don't waste any time in running in to sort of grab hold of any tragedy or any issue, any mass shooting. So for Hillary, the issue is gun control. She will seize upon this to call for more gun control.
Yeah.
And this isn't really about gun control, Brian. This is about trying to capture a block of voters that are very passionate about this issue, bring them under your tent, as they say in America. And then Donald Trump seized upon this to say, threaten the president if he doesn't call this out as radical Islam, if he doesn't use the term radical Islam. This is the kind of Lindsey Graham or Donald Trump, this language that's been appropriated by members of the Republican Party to show their outrage of radical Islam, and we need more security. We need to do more.
And then the whole of that gay vote is brought in as one big block because you've now focused them on Islam, you've focused them on gun control.
Correct. That's the national security
And you've
vote.
Also put your arm around them. So you stay with us because we'll protect the gay community.
And we'll keep you safe as Americans. And we need to do more to attack ISIS overseas. So Hillary has actually taken this to another level where she's gone in the statement and saying we need to do more overseas for security and be more
aggressive, probably.
Aggressive, yeah. So she's got a triple kind of agenda she's woven with this event. So calling it a hate crime against the LGBT community. I mean, you can't assign motive to this until an investigation is done. It very well may be a hate crime. It might be an ISIS-inspired attack, whatever that is. But prior to any investigation of a killing this size, 50 people. Or we're told 50 people are dead, right? Wouldn't that require some investigation? The ballistics alone, Brian, is going to take a huge amount of resources. And yet the politicians, President Obama, Donald Trump, Hillary Clinton, are rushing to grab hold of this, to extract some political capital out of it for their own partisan benefit or for whatever they're doing in their campaigning and so forth. So it's when
it's offensively fast, the way they're reacting and the politicization of what is, if we take it on face value, the horrific death of people, jump on the political bandwagon in order to skew it back towards an international terrorist agenda.
Exactly.
Pretty cynical. So where do we go here with blabbermouth.net? So Pantera.
So this is amazing. This is another coincidence. The night before this happened in Orlando, only miles away from this horrific nightclub event, we're told, one of the singers from The Voice, this is a kind of X Factor equivalent in the United States, Christina Grimmie, was shot and killed at the concert, right as she got off stage.
Right.
And this was
So a high-profile event, lots of people watching.
very
yeah,
high
killed.
profile, national news, and then this prompted Pantera, this is a leading metal band, to come out and advocate for more security and more gun control.
Controls. Yeah.
So again, this is part feeding into that exact same agenda. Is it a coincidence that this happened in Florida the day less than 24 hours before this nightclub incident? I don't know, but it certainly seems like the politicization is no coincidence.
Right, so
the
this-
events might be, but not the politicization.
This is grouping up young people, heavy metal fans, follow the rock stars. What do they say? Gun control. So that's sweeping up that group.
And
then the
pro-war.
gays in the second one.
Correct, and
Yeah.
pro-war, and getting the LGBT community to back more aggressive military action in Syria, getting women to back more war.
Yeah.
This is all part of the social engineering aspect. This is the programming in the aftermath.
Right.
So see something, say something, and then we need to do more for security, and we need gun control. It's just a whole agenda on the back of a tragedy. And no one's wasting any time in getting this rolling within hours.
So the key question is who actually created that that tragedy. And Hillary, we bring on screen again here with defeating international terror. That means defeating international terror groups, working with allies and partners to go after them wherever they are, countering their attempts to recruit people here and everywhere, and hardening our defences at home. It also means refusing to be intimidated and staying true to our values. This is sickening stuff. In my mind, this woman is such a hypocrite, such a dangerous hypocrite.
And what are our values? This is the part that I just don't get.
War, death,
Because
terrorism.
if you look at ISIS, the ISIS crisis, and you look at the chaos that has ensued in Syria, Hillary Clinton is one of the architects of that conflict. She fronted the Friends of Syria tour, where she was bringing in all the Arab monarchs and the countries that were helping to overthrow the Syrian government to recruit, finance, and send terrorists from foreign countries into Syria to wreak havoc that we see today. She was one of the architects alongside of William Hague. So a lot of people don't realize this because she jumped ship from Secretary of State in 2013, allegedly for health reasons, but we know it was to run for president. So she left all that baggage conveniently behind when she left office.
Well, interesting you should mention William Hague because we got a little picture of him coming up in a few minutes.
Oh, interesting. Okay.
Yeah.
So this is interesting. So, you know, I'll end this line here just by saying that I think it was Thomas Friedman, or one of the best-selling authors, said that we're one major terrorist attack in America away from a Donald Trump presidency, because all the presidential candidates are trying to frame it as 9/11 again. They've been doing this for months. And so, ironically, Hillary has seized the security conversation because it was attached to an LGBT or a gay club tragedy event.
Yeah.
So she's hijacked the Trump security juggernaut, if you will, to occupy this tragedy. But this is politics in America. It's all rhetoric, hyperbole, and opportunism.
Yeah.
And,
But at the end of the day, it's to get more power over the American people, and taking guns away, of course, is a very dangerous step.
So here's the coincidence, another coincidence. There was another man yesterday who was on his way to a Hollywood Gay Pride event and was caught with assault rifle and explosives in the car. What are the odds of this? Was this a stand-down operation here? We're meant to think that these weren't connected.
So it says here, the 20-year-old going to a gay parade. Yeah. So we got all the links in again.
So this is the New York Daily News.
Right.
So is this a coincidence, Brian, that you had these two separate, from the West Coast and the East Coast, two very similar gunmen or persons of interest going to gay events on the same day?
Yeah.
One of them was allowed to go and the other has been stopped.
And the other thing you could say is that the gay agenda has now been running very strongly for at least, 20 years. So why now? What's the big problem now?
To me, it seems very disingenuous, the official plot line on this, what we're meant to have in terms of what the media are saying this is.
Yeah.
It seems very disingenuous. It seems to me kind of contrived. And we're meant to assume that, of course, it's an ISIS-inspired attack, and he didn't like gays, according to his father, Omar Mateen. Amir Siddiqui, his father, said, "We apologize for the incident, and my son was very upset when he saw two men kissing 2 weeks ago." That doesn't automatically prompt someone to go out.
Well, I was going to say, so he hasn't seen any of the gay parades going on. He hasn't seen the...
But the public are meant to assume and make this connection, this automatic, oh, of course, this is what Muslims will do when they get upset. You know, it doesn't make any sense at all on its face, but yet we're meant to think case closed.
Right.
And so this issue of terrorism, Brian, I'll end with this. You know, they say this is a terrorist incident. What's more terrifying, by an order of magnitude, is, to me, what's more terrifying, and to a lot of people out there, is the speed in which the political ripple effect to accelerate the police state agenda domestically and internationally on the back of any one of these so-called terrorist or mass shooting events, whether it's in Brussels, or whether it's in San Bernardino, or whether it's in Orlando. That is frightening to me, how fast the political juggernaut goes to alter policy and to increase and accelerate the police state. And in terms of surveillance, whether it's Apple having to give away their phone encryption to the FBI, or to give your personal liberties or freedoms away, give away your privacy on the back of these very shady events involving some very shady people and some shady organizations, which we have demonstrated already. So that, to me, is more terrifying, is that the rollout of this super police state.
Well, we're going to continue this theme because we're going to jump to GCHQ, and I think the people who started to alert me to this article, because it leads us in a very interesting direction. So we've heard everything you've had to say, Patrick, of what's happening with the states. Let's just have a look at GCHQ here, and here's the headline: US whistleblower Snowden reveals GCHQ spy program with secret link to the Scottish police. And of course, we're always interested in Police Scotland because we've got a dictatorship running north of the border. So it says the documents confirm that a little-known policing body called the Scottish Recording Centre, the SRC, was given access to information logs that include millions of communication data, including phone activity, internet history, and social media behaviour on Facebook. And it ran this program, which was apparently called Milk White, to share data with devolved policing and tax authorities. So all of a sudden, we've got this stuff being used. Now, just have a look at this. So we've got Police State Scotland, where we've got no separation of powers between political, judicial, and the police. They're all one unit in one country. We've got the SRC, which we've just mentioned, being given a huge amount of data on the public. And then we now know that this data was used, amongst other data, to break the law, to cover up criminal activity by the state. So if we follow a little bit of this through, it leads us to this organisation, which is the Intersection of Communications Commissioner's Office. And we've got a statement by the big boss, the Right Honourable Sir Stanley Burton. He made this when he was appointed. He says, "I'm delighted to have been appointed by the Prime Minister to undertake this role at what is a especially significant and challenging time for investigatory powers." Behind all that is, of course, the hint of the big terrorist problems. Here's the man, and of course he's a Right Honourable, so that means in British, raw British language, trust me, I'm a good fellow. And down here it says that the IOCCO is an independent oversight body, independent of government and parliament, and it conducts thorough and robust inspection to public authorities with the power to intercept communications like GCHQ, MI5. Well, we just highlight, of course, that the man says that he's appointed by David Cameron, but apparently he's independent of government. Not sure how that works, but I don't get a good feeling about it, Patrick.
I guess the government trusts him so much, they appointed a good guy.
To look after their needs.
Sure, but he's yet not accountable or not going to be influenced at all by the people who appointed him.
No, I don't think so. So we delved a bit deeper. We had a look at number 2 here, and we come to a lady, Joanna Cavan. She calls herself head of the IOCCO. And her background is amazing because she's an intercept specialist. She's worked with all sorts of public authorities, intelligence agencies, police forces, private companies, bodies, NGOs. She's done the lot. But there isn't a single word of substance in this CV as to where she's actually learnt anything. But we know that she's got to be a good person because she's just been given the OBE by the Queen. So here's the organisation tweeting out congratulations to our head of the IOCCO for receiving an OBE in the Queen's birthday honours list. So let's bring in on top of that lot one of our famous wiring diagrams where we were pointing out links between British intelligence, the American intelligence agencies, private companies. In the centre of that, we got Francis Maud. But the key thing we were saying is we've now got a mix of public bodies, the spying agencies, and big corporate interests, including universities and corporations in Israel. So has this lady worked with any of these people? I mean, what do we know about her and what her actual ability is to be an independent regulator? We don't have a clue, do we?
It's a very interesting ring of organizations, however.
Well, we'll show a little bit more on that. So what's she been up to? Well, it didn't take us long to find that she's been working very closely with the European Union. And she said that police and spy agencies haven't fully tested the limits of their current powers. So she doesn't see that they need any more. They're just being told you should make full use of your existing powers.
But what is the inference in that statement? If you read between the lines, what is really being communicated through that statement? That is, we can do whatever we want, and we will eventually do whatever we want. It's just a question of time. That's what's inferred in that statement, clearly. So,
and are they spying at the moment on all these terrorist organisations? No, what we're talking about is the data of the very people who are supposedly told we're the ones at risk of the terrorists, but they're spying on our private activities. So let's come on to this link with the Scottish Government, because this is where it gets fascinating. What did we find on the Interceptions Commissioner's Office report is this document here. And what he's saying is that Police Scotland broke the law. Now, it's a little bit difficult to read on screen, but he was asked to review conduct of the Police Service of Scotland in order to determine whether there had been any contravention of the acquisition and disclosure of communications data. This is going back to November 2015. And what he says is, yes, they indeed broke the law by hoovering up data from, beg your pardon, let's see, we can come back to that. It should have scanned. Is it going to do it? Yes, it is. So what was the data? Well, the data concerned the confidentiality of journalistic sources. So Police Scotland was using data unlawfully in order to look into the background of a journalist and find out what their sources. Now, why do we think Police Scotland would want to be looking into the background of journalists? Do you think maybe those journalists were getting a little bit too close to the corruption and criminal activity at the head of the Scottish Parliament or judiciary?
Certainly, absolutely. So, this happened when Associated Press offices were raided by the Department of Justice, the DOJ. This was under Eric Holder, only 3 years ago. And that was because they were after the sources that AP was keeping, their confidential sources, for a story they were about to break about a suicide bomb squad in Yemen, who the head of the suicide bomb squad was a CIA informant.
Yeah, well, you wouldn't want that sort of thing to come out, would you?
So that's why the raid happened. So they were onto something. The press were onto something. The government came in to shut it down. That is an abuse of power.
Right, and that is where you need intelligence agencies able to break into anybody's email account, see who you've been talking to, see who I've been talking to, and if it looks like it's going to embarrass the government, then we're going to shut it down. So if we follow this little story through, we get David Cameron on screen because, of course, he is head of all of the security arrangements in UK. So we just popped him up there. He was bigging up GCHQ in that little clip. But let's remind ourselves of the big mixture of people in this intelligence world. And then we've got top right William Hague. We've got Rifkin, who was thrown out eventually for dirty deals with Chinese companies. But these are the men running British intelligence. We've got Sawyers, who's there down under the MI6 building. And he's of interest because if we've got time a little bit later, he's recently been to the Bilderberg meeting. We brought in bottom right Brooks Newmark, the man boasting of being on the Syrian border with al-Nusra connected Syrian Free Army people, General Idris. And these are the people clustered around in our intelligence services. Are they to be trusted? I would say none of them. So let's put them back in their box and follow the story through. Here's GCHQ, which creates Milk White, where they're hoovering up vast amounts of public data and giving it to organisations like the Scottish Police. So all of that gets shared, phone activity, internet histories, social media behaviour. And that goes through to this mysterious Scottish Police Recording Centre, which I have to say to date, nobody seems to know what on earth this is. Who's in charge of it? Who's got oversight of it? We don't know. Dirty little cell, presumably. It was described in the article as an obscure Scotland-based surveillance unit. Okay, and then this is just a little note saying the Chief Constable of Police Scotland has powers under Section 6 of the Regulatory Investigatory Powers Act. So he's allowed to do certain things, but we've already known that his organisation's broken the law. And they are undermining investigating an investigatory journalist. And I think this is significant. Now let's bring in what they might have been hiding, because the big issue around politicians in Scotland, the judiciary and the police, is paedophilia. And we've recently been reporting on this extraordinary case, which is the Doherty case, where this couple are on a Scottish estate. A man offers to buy their son to abuse him for £25,000. And from the time this couple reported that, they've been hounded, victimised and chased not only through Scotland, but into Ireland, targeted in a very sophisticated way, communications intercepted, bank accounts intercepted. This could only be done with the use of these very high-level intelligence facilities. So their story is about paedophilia. Scottish government runs a mile, they get targeted. Or we could come in a slightly different direction here, and we can come back to Robert Greene, who, of course, was looking at paedophilia. But the other thing Robert Greene was highlighting is connections between a sadomasochistic club in Scotland called Violate and members of the judiciary and the political class. So what have we got? State organisation there, which is capable of tracking people, hacking into their accounts. It's all becoming a little bit too obvious, I think.
Yeah, very seedy business. But the overlap between the government and private interests in this case is pretty shocking.
Is growing and growing because, of course, much of the IT provision is coming from commercial sources. And I thought just to link it in with you, we go back to this article here, which is saying that NSA, National Security Agency, had been paying 100 million in secret funding to GCHQ in order to share in data.
Well, that's an offshoring arrangement as well. I might point out that there's certain things that the NSA cannot do legally, like intercept people's communications without a warrant. So they outsource this to GCHQ to do the heavy lifting offshore. Right. So it's not breaking U.S. law, or the U.S. agency is not breaking their own law.
They get somebody else to do that.
And then they troll through it, they analyze it, or they digest it, and then they spit back any relevant bits after that, back to the NSA. Vice versa, the NSA could also outsource do the outsourcing work for GCHQ for British shores collection of
well,
data.
Patrick, as always, you were spot on with that. So if we just pop that one back on screen, we'll add this comment here, which I had lined up, which is ministers have denied that GCHQ does the NSA's dirty work. But in the documents, GCHQ describes Britain's surveillance laws and regulatory regime as a selling point for the Americans. So there you are, you were spot on. Americans want to use our system because it's basically lax.
And how different is that, Brian, than using Guantanamo Bay to torture, to detain without charges indefinitely so-called terrorist suspects and torture them for years and years offshore, away from the American legal system?
Yeah.
How is it?
It's despicable.
On principle, it's the same
stuff.
thing.
Yeah.
It's only the deed is different, but the principle behind it is the same. It's offshoring your dirty work so that you don't have to face whatever the Constitution or the legal framework at home is.
Right. Now, with an eye on the time, I'm just going to jump over a couple of things which we had prepared, because the man I want to get on screen is this gentleman who we just mentioned, Mr. Sawyers. Now, of course, we've had Bilderbergers just finished, but we got the ex-head of MI6 meeting behind closed doors with international bankers whose organisations have already been found guilty of corruption, money laundering, drug laundering. What was this man doing at the Bilderberg conference?
I don't know, but it probably has something to do with the agenda that Mike and I covered late last week. This is an agenda about AI, intelligence gathering, data trawling, and then managing this globally and transnationally through private companies, a series of private companies, and companies like Palantir, which means crystal ball, by the way. The name Palantir means crystal ball, that they're able to project and predict in the future based on a massive amount of data gathering, intelligence gathering. And maybe this is some of the former intelligence chiefs could be key players in that, making this agenda happen.
Right, okay, and very quickly, we'll just bring in this lady on the subject of Bilderberg. I'd like some answers on this. We've got a Labour MP, Helen Goodman, suddenly invited into the Bilderberg Club, and I ask why. If you look into her background, she's been involved with Children's Society, she was involved with the Czech Velvet Revolution, Commission for the Future on Multi-Ethnic. Who is this woman to be invited into the Bilderberg Club? I don't know the answer, but she wasn't invited there as a pretty face. She wasn't invited there to make the sandwiches for these high-level men. She was invited for a reason, and yet we would assume this woman is almost unknown. So, interesting. And let's end on this, because this is really the state of the nation. As just an example, this is what the local Plymouth newspaper, the Plymouth Herald, thinks is important news, as it encourages us to get excited that we could have a naked bike ride through Plymouth. This is mind control in a spectacular sense.
Absolutely, this is the apogee of culture in modern Britain.
Yeah, welcome to Plymouth, Patrick.
It doesn't get any better than that. But I wanted to, before we go, just quickly plug. We did an interview with Mike Robinson and an activist and author named Daddy Cherry from Haiti last night on the Sunday Wire, and I encourage people to go listen to it. It was unbelievable. The amount of information that she shared with us about the UN, the NGO complex, and even the Clinton Foundation, and how they destroyed the country of Haiti as a case study of how these the do-gooders work on an international scale is really incredible. So that's at 21stcenturywire.com and the Sunday Wire.
And when can people see that now?
Right now. You can go and listen to that. It's really something. One of the best I've ever done.
Right. Patrick, thank you very much for joining us today. I'll just say thank viewers and listeners for joining us. If you like what we do, we need your help. We can only do this with your continued financial support. If you're not already subscribing, please do. If you can donate, please do. Would we like to do more? Yes, we would. We can only do it with your help. Thanks for joining us. Bye-bye.